As you may know, the popular show Ed, Edd, and Eddy has been running for a long time. However, between October 7th and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office that the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of going on to make episode 34, was supposed to replay episode 1 at 5 a.m. People reported a very disturbing new episode premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently the quality of the episode was mediocre at best when held to the show's regular standards. Animation was choppy, sound was both distorted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down similar to a crappy VHS tape were received. Scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing. The characters also behaved oddly, because instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained that they seemed extremely agitated and hateful towards each other, and constantly about to begin sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why, but he spoke with a sexual tone that further bothered the viewers. I was one of the viewers. The episode began with Eddy walking down the street with Ed. I noted that Double D was missing. There was an angular shot coming from in front of the two to show them walking towards the viewer. Eddy was wearing an angry look, as he does when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around the irises. Ed looked strangely sad. He dragged behind Eddy, with tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series' main antagonist, was riding his bike, opposite of the Eds. Towards them, the shot became blurry, and low moans were heard coming from Eddy before Kevin hit him, which never happened because the screen went to black. The screen then snapped back to Kevin, was again headed toward Eddy. The view was so blurry this time all I saw was a green blob headed toward a yellow one. Again the low moan, but only this time it sounded like the microphone was broken, and a loud static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddy's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps being the only audio. The steps were very, very clear, as I was shown a bird's-eye view of him scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Ed began screeching, sound like a fisher cat as he moved wildly around the cell of the room. Faster and faster until the screen began blurring again. The purple room's color is now an orange blur. An extreme close-up of Eddy's front door sat in absolute silence for a long time. At least 2 minutes of dead silence at a door. Next, we see Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor of some sort. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, is crying loudly, with Sarah trying to comfort him in an unusually warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah. It hurts." Suddenly, the door of the room is smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room. Jimmy was shown with his headgear mangled, the front bent upward, stretching his upper lip very high. Tearing proportions, the front of his gums were trickling blood, and teeth were missing. The disturbing part was he had lost both arms and legs beforehand, apparently, and sat a paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion the others had beaten him up and bent his headgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf in this darkened shed, fisting a cow repeatedly. The visual loops gets blurry again, and the scene cuts out. Naz is now reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is strangely perfect now. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushion as he crawls out on all fours in a comedic way. Pops up behind her, still obvious. I laugh because someone forgot to draw his eyes, and I thought of a mole. Suddenly, I stopped laughing, as he started swallowing her head, in still a cartoonish fashion, of course. But this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed extremely small human eyes. The final scene begins with Eddy. He's now alone without Ed. The quality declines worse than before, and he is still walking. The sun is now lighting the mood somewhat, as he smiles and begins running. The door is shown again, and we see through Eddy's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. The house is nice and bright, but with a very badly played violin begins blaring. The only audio in this scene as he makes his way through the house. Eddy opens the door to his room, and Double D is laying on his floor, no longer in a claymation sequence. The camera showed Eddy's house for the remainder of the episode. About 3 minutes. Afterwards, the next program began instantly.